All right, hello everybody. We are back in here at Live in the Wellness Garden. Here is Brianna.
Hello.
And I am Andreas, your garden coordinator. And welcome back. We're going to be talking about transplanting tomatoes into hydroponics and aquaponics today. But before we get into that, let's just do a brief walkthrough of the garden. Whenever I start my day here, I just love to do a little walkthrough, see what's going on. Just try and make observations as to what's doing well, what isn't, what's working, and what is not, and we'll do that really quick. So this cover crop is certainly working pretty well. It's getting quite tall. It's taller than Brianna now, way taller. And remember when we seeded this in on one of the previous lives? That was only like what, 3 months ago? You can grow a pretty crazy amount of plants in just a couple months, and we're going to be utilizing all of this material to feed our soil here in the wellness garden. But a lot of the cover crop is kind of finishing up now. We do have some flower spikes on the millets, as you can see here, and the flax is pretty much done. We'll be harvesting this for flax seed that we could either use as a food source or to grow more flax in the future. Flax is a fantastic flowering plant to grow in your garden. Supports lots of pollinators and supports soil health. So we also have the leaf-footed bugs in here. I'm definitely a bit concerned at this point that their population may be growing a bit too much. I'm not sure what, if anything, is keeping them in check. So definitely want to keep an eye on the leaf-footed bugs. You can't really deal with them effectively with pesticides. And we don't use pesticides really here anyways, so a bit concerning, but the cover crop looks good.
Show the jujubes.
Oh yes, the jujubes.
Because I don't think last time we showed them in this.
Oh yeah, the jujube tree is loaded this year. These come in around September, October, so fairly soon. Really excited for the jujubes. And under the jujube tree I put some native California mugwort and some native milkweed. We are introducing more native plants to the garden. The kumquats are doing well as well. Looks like we got some fruit set happening right now. The kumquats just put out a pretty big flush of flowers, and now we're going to hopefully get plenty of kumquats in the winter, because that's when they come. Some more of the companion planting / polyculture systems that we've established recently. This one has the eggplants that we had previously. Plus some beans, some cosmos, some radishes, and some zucchini and squash. And in the center we have sunflowers. The sunflowers and many of the other seedlings have suffered damage from insects and fungal disease. Very common occurrence in the summer, but hopefully they hang on and survive. This is the medicinal bed. Right here we have hyssop, and you can see the little skipper moth feeding off of the hyssop. Fantastic plant for pollinators. This is common mugwort. I just harvested a bunch of it last week, dried it up, made it into tea. It makes a fantastic herbal tea that could be used for. I like to use it as sort of like a calming agent. Like if I have a lot of stress in my life in the moment, or if I just want to relax a bit before bed. I find it's really good for that personally, but it can be used for other things. Some people use it to promote healthful sleep, dreaming, and I also heard that it can be used for stomach ailments and menstrual issues. Not making any medical recommendations here. This is just what I've heard about this particular plant, but I really like it. Then we have the native mugwort, which has many of the same benefits, and then we have the Tulsi holy basil. Lemon tree's loaded.
This looks interesting. What is that?
What's that?
It's like fuzzy white moss.
Oh yeah?
What is that?
I think those are mealybugs, a pest. Now the lemon tree has been plagued with pests this year, but it is bearing prolifically. We have so many lemons. We have a decent amount of limes as well, if you look into the lime tree. Very exciting. And this is our chaos garden bed. The corn has gotten huge. I mean, look at this. This is just unbelievable. I'm not even sure if this is the same variety. Hold on, I'm trying to get a good... This corn is massive. I think we're good. And the sunchokes or Jerusalem artichokes are also getting massive, and the black-eyed peas are absolutely thriving in this heat. Goji berries starting to ripen up, as are these blackberries right here. I've tried them. There are a couple on the plant that are ripe, but they are kind of sour. I think that just could be due to lack of sun exposure, so maybe the ones on the outside right here when they ripen up will be a bit better. Then of course we have our support species. We'll talk more about support species in the future. Tithonia Mexican sunflower, then our Gandules, as we've talked about previously. It's too hot for the tomatoes to make tomatoes, but they are growing. And then we have our modified Three Sisters bed with this huge sunflower plant growing on the end. This thing has to be like 11 feet tall now, and it's just shy of 4 months old. Like, this is a huge sunflower plant, and everything that loves the heat is taking off right now, pretty much, including the moringa or malunggay if you're from the Philippines. This stuff is fantastic. I love growing moringa. Yeah, pretty much put on 4 feet of growth in the past maybe 2 months, I would say. Getting huge. I think we're going to coppice them in the winter. That is, cut them all back to the ground, and they'll resprout in the spring and become very bushy. And underneath them we have some wild cherry tomatoes. Very hardy variety called Matt's Wild Cherry. It is a landrace, which means that it hasn't been selectively bred at all. It's just a wild strain of tomatoes.
Where is that?
This one right here.
There.
Matt's Wild Cherry. How are those blackberries?
They are, let's see, taste test again.
They're sour,
They're
aren't
good.
they?
They're a little bit sour.
I
But
think
you
they're
know
pretty
what?
sour.
They would be good if you made
Oh,
like
look,
a
you made a
blackberry
friend.
jam. Oh my gosh, I don't like these!
That's a fig eater beetle.
Oh no!
That's a native scarab beetle.
Okay.
Apparently they can't see.
You know, I know they're blind, but I don't know.
Yeah.
No matter how long I've been in the garden, I'm terrified of those. So.
I know.
Oh gosh.
The mint looks great. So wasn't it last time we sprayed the compost tea?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that compost tea. So, as I have said in the past about compost tea and compost in general.
Well, mind you, this is not every time someone says compost, I automatically worm compost. This is not worm compost.
No, this was from the cold pile, the cold compost pile. So, this one in the back right here. I just pulled some more compost out of it today. But this is the cold compost, which is where we put a lot of our garden waste to just pretty much break down very slowly over the course of 6 months to a year. All of the perennial plants responded fantastically to this compost tea. Absolutely fantastically. Like this mint just started popping, like pretty much within days.
That mint looks
like
really cute.
yeah, like this mint before was like yellowing and starting to look a bit sickly, and it just started to pop pretty much like right away. Like, and pretty much every perennial that we sprayed with the stuff has responded so well to it, lemon verbena included. The achira is starting to look really good as well. This is a tropical root vegetable, and the moringa as well, and the passion fruit. Just everything just kind of greened up, except for some of our annuals. I think there might have been something nasty in there that went for the seedlings, at least some of the seedlings. So I reseeded with some of okra, and these look very healthy. But you have to. It's another. This just goes to show that your compost tea is only as good as your compost, and if you have something nasty in your compost, you could be propagating it in your compost tea and then spraying it right on your vegetables. So make sure you have good compost if you're going to apply compost or compost tea. I think in the future we're going to stick to using worm castings for our compost teas.
I'm excited for the next live.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to be restarting the worm farm next week.
We're going to bring each of our worm families coming together to breed new worms.
Oh yeah, I have some really wonderful biology in my worm farm at home. Yeah. Oh hey, look at that. It looks like the Roma tomatoes that we did get are starting to ripen up.
Look at that.
Very exciting. So we'll get a couple Romas. But I think it's just been way too hot this year for these tomatoes, and they're just dropping. They're growing, but they're just dropping flowers left and right, pretty much. Like this just came right off, and I think it's partially a nutrient issue, but also partially from the heat, because this leaf curl that you see on here is also from the heat. So tomatoes really don't like extreme heat. Like once it gets above 95 degrees, they'll pretty much stop fruiting. Unless you're in hydroponics or aquaponics, which is what we're going to talk about today. So do you want to begin making our way over? Oh, I did talk about the chaos garden bed with the corn. Looking fantastic. We're getting some silks on there, and the tassels are popping off. The tassels are in full flower. This is the male part of the plant. This is the female part of the plant, which will become the ears of corn. The pollen has to travel down from the male part to the female part and hit all of those silks on there in order to ensure proper pollination and the proper development of the corn cobs. So we have been hand pollinating here, because normally you need to be growing more corn in a space in order to get proper pollination. But same thing here. This is still not quite enough space, so we will be hand pollinating here as well. But the corn, out of everything, has been doing the best in this bed. As you can see, some things are suffering. I think this is from the heat. But when it comes to other things, I definitely believe that something in the compost had a part to play. But everything that's super heat tolerant is good, including the okra. So I don't know. And for some reason, this is why I'm thinking it has to do with the compost tea, because for some reason this squash, I think this is a summer squash or a zucchini, this seedling is doing so well, but all the other ones have just kind of failed. So we're gonna have to reseed those back in, and I'm gonna be looking to do that tomorrow. Anyways, let's move on. We're going to move on to the main subject of this live stream now, and we'll explain a little bit about what aquaponics and hydroponics are. If you all remembered, in these plots we had kale growing. On Tuesday I removed the kale, and I pretty much rinsed out all of the media, which cleaned it out, because we do want to remove the solid waste particles from the media in aquaponics every once in a while. So this is a system that I've pretty much continually experienced issues with, and I think it's just due to certain aspects of the components that were used. But I've been able to get it to run reasonably well. And I've been able to grow quite a bit of kale in the system, and we also got some great tomatoes out of the system last year. So we're going to be putting in more tomatoes. So for those of you who do not know, aquaponics and hydroponics are both two methods of growing food without soil. So in both cases, the nutrients are actually present within the water itself, and the water is continuously pumped and recycled through these systems. So the basic design is probably best illustrated with the hydroponic system. I'm going to see if I can tighten this a bit. Get it loosened up. There we go. Let's move you guys. So the hydroponic system. So down here we have a reservoir. This is full of our nutrient solution. In hydroponics, you just add fertilizers to the water. That's it. Then the water is pumped up from this reservoir to this bed. The bed fills up and drains repeatedly thanks to the action of this automatic siphon. Probably about a 15-minute cycle in this case. So when the water gets all the way to the top of the fill line, which is determined by this standpipe in the center here, then the siphon will initiate and drain all of the water out of the bed back into the reservoir right here. And then when the water gets to the very bottom of the bed, the siphon will break, and then the cycle will repeat. So you have a bed that is continuously filling up and filling up with and draining water that contains high concentrations of nutrients that the plant can access with the root systems. So we're essentially feeding water and nutrients directly to the plants. We're cutting out the middleman of soil, and just feeding the plants directly. Aquaponics is hydroponics where fish become integrated. So as you can see right here, that is a tilapia.
How many fish are there?
I think like 8, about that size, like 8 tilapia that are almost plate sized. So in this case, instead of relying mostly on fertilizer, the nutrients actually come from the waste products of the fish. And in this bed, we have a community of beneficial microbes that break the nutrients down and make them available to the plants. It's a whole cycle that repeats. Then the plants will remove these nutrients from the water, thus purifying the water for the fish. So we want to compare this to soil. So how do these systems perform compared to soil in terms of growth rates, in terms of, I guess, flavor? That's subjective. That's not really what we're assessing right here, because we are doing this for research purposes. This is a study that the Magrum Center is conducting. And the main thing is the antioxidant content of the vegetable matter that is produced. So last weekend, I had the privilege of joining one of the folks who's working with the Magrum Center, Julie, in the food science lab to begin running the antioxidant assay, where we actually took leaf samples from the kale and pretty much just blended them up, extracted out all of the whatever water soluble components there were, which is where most of the antioxidants would be. And now we're going to use this process called ORAC in order to determine how much antioxidants are in the leaves from each of these 3 plots. So we have our samples prepared. Now we just need to run the assay, as it's called. It's pretty much just the testing, for those of you who are not familiar with the jargon. So we're going to be doing the testing soon. But we're comparing aquaponics, hydroponics, and geoponics, or soil, right here, which we just planted out with tomato seedlings. So we have 3 varieties. We have Rutgers, we have Roma, and we have Oregon Spring. And in inland Southern California, in the San Fernando Valley, it seems to me that this is your earliest opportunity to plant tomatoes for a fall harvest. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get tomatoes in right now. Succession planting. And for this geoponic or soil bed right here, pretty much just topped it up with more potting soil. We used the Fox Farm Happy Frog potting soil, which is supplemented with beneficial microbes and mycorrhizal fungal spores. And the tomatoes are highly mycorrhizal. I see you munching on those tomatoes.
They're really good.
The hydroponic cherry tomatoes here.
What variety is this?
Black cherry. Yeah, they're pretty good. So in order to turn over this bed, what we did was we added some just standard tomato and vegetable fertilizer, an organic blend that contained all sorts of good stuff like alfalfa meal, feather meal, worm castings, kelp meal, and some strains of beneficial microbes. We also added some azomite rock dust, which will supplement micronutrients, and then we installed a drip irrigation system and mulched over, because that is something we're really going to need in these hotter months of the summer. We're going to need to have irrigation every single day, and we're not here every single day to water this plot right here. So in order for these plants to be successful, they need to be watered every day during this part of the summer. So that's why we have installed the drip irrigation system. So let's get these tomatoes in now, and we'll talk about the process on how to get them in. And if we have time at the end of the live stream, we'll talk a little bit more about hydroponics and aquaponics. We have talked a bit about it in the past, but we'll go and have a discussion about it once again, because they're fantastic methods for growing food. You know, it does cost a little bit of money to start up, but they're great, and like you can expect to achieve growth rates 1.5 to 2 times that of in soil. Like every single time we've run this test in these test plots here, the plants in the hydroponic and aquaponic systems are twice the size of the ones in the soil beds. So pretty much guaranteed to get bigger harvests in these systems. And don't get me wrong, you know, I love soil. You guys know that I love, you know, growing in soil. I love maintaining healthy soil. I love regenerative agriculture. But, you know, these systems are also great for growing your crops, especially if you have a very small space. Because, I mean, like, if you have a balcony, like, this is the ultimate solution. Because you're going to be able to get way more production out of an aquaponics system, especially, than, like, containers. So, yeah, so it's time to plant. Here's the general procedure. So we have our seedlings.
This one I watched.
These are started in hydroponics as well. It's actually very easy to start seeds in hydroponics, and these are also organically grown. We use fish and kelp fertilizer to fertilize these at a low dosage as they're germinating, and they are ready to go in. So we'll talk specifically about how to plant tomatoes as well. That's not the stuff we need. We need the
not fish and kelp?
not fish and kelp, just the regular kelp. It should be in there. It should say like seaweed extract or something like that. So the reason why we use the seaweed extract is because the seaweed extract contains cytokinins, which stimulate root growth. Yes, that's it. So this is what we're going to use. Not endorsing this particular brand. There are many great brands out there. It's basically the same product. There are different extraction methods for it, but I really haven't noticed really much of a difference between like the different products that use like different extraction methods. So then, Brianna, would you mind filling this 5-gallon bucket up halfway with water?
Sure.
From one of the, what's that?
Chlorinated?
Dechlorinated, yes. We use dechlorinated water here wherever possible because chlorine is harmful to the microbes that are present in the soil and in the aquaponic system. In conventional hydroponics, where we're using synthetic nutrients like that system here, we're not worried about microbes. If anything, we want the system to be more on the sterile side. But in organic hydroponics and in aquaponics, we want to make sure that we are using dechlorinated water because we are reliant upon the microbes to make the nutrients available to the plants. I'm going to take a quick water break. All right, we got our water.
Yeah.
And this is not an exact science, you know. I mean, you can be very exact with hydroponics. You could dial in your nutrients so precisely that, you know, I'm feeding these tomatoes the exact NPK they need at all times, you know, throughout every single stage of their life cycle, week by week, you know. Like, some people are super serious about hydroponics, but aquaponics is less of an exact science. You just really want to keep your system's water chemistry within a certain set of parameters, and really the only way that you do that is by making sure you have enough filtration, because this is also our filtration, our biofiltration as it is called, which is the action of the beneficial microbes living on this media, which will convert the ammonia in the fish waste and the other constituents of the fish waste, the solid fraction, into plant available nutrients. So we need to make sure we have enough filtration. We also need to make sure that we have a proper fish to plant ratio, or as in aquaponics they call it a feed rate ratio, because the amount of plants you have translates, you can calculate this, like the amount of plants that you have will translate directly into how much fish food you should be feeding every single day, and that translates to how like the weight of your fish that you need to have in the system, and that translates to how many individual fish you should have. So this system has 8 tilapia that are probably between a ½ pound and a pound in weight, so pretty decent for a system of this size, and tilapia are generally the best choice for aquaponics, provided you can ensure that the water remains warm. You do not want water temperatures to fall below 60 degrees with tilapia if you wish for them to remain productive and happy, and if it gets below 50, they're dead. So might not be the best solution for most people, especially if you're running a larger system outdoors. You don't have a proper heating system, because heating is expensive in terms of energy. This system takes 500 watts of heating, and that's a lot. Not very efficient, but if you want to raise a fish that does not require heating, I would highly recommend anything in the carp family that is goldfish, koi, common carp, or channel catfish, or bluegill. So those are your best bets for Southern California, especially the channel catfish. You need a bit more of an intricate system to handle channel catfish in particular, but they're the best choice for sure. Anyways.
Did not know the catfish was I thought it was tilapia. No, that's the common one.
Any fish that you can grow in a tank, you can grow in aquaponics. Any freshwater fish.
Wow.
Like some people do sturgeon, you know, like.
Would our puffer fish freshwater?
Saltwater. And that's not, you know, because of the fish, it's because plants don't, like, grow in salt water. So, like, the sodium will destroy them. Oh, no.
Oh,
that was embarrassing.
It was already open.
It seemed it was already open. Well, that's okay. It's just seaweed extract. I wouldn't drink this stuff, but Or maybe the seal is broken. It could be the seal. I'm not trying to find out at this point. But this is not an exact science. I'm just going to put a splash in there.
Okay. It said a teaspoon per gallon. Okay.
Doesn't really matter. I mean, this might be a little bit too much, but might want to dilute it a little bit more. And then this is fertilizer, so.
Right.
Like, don't overdo it, you know? That just came out really fast.
Is it still hot?
Yeah, it's still hot.
Really?
Some people use solar power to heat up their system. They literally, what they'll do is they'll take like this black irrigation tubing, right? And they'll coil it up into like pretty much just like a spiral, right? And they'll pump water through it. And when you leave like a coil of black pipe out in the sun, it heats up really rapidly. I mean, think about it. This is just a hose, you know, like this is blue and gray. But anything that's black is going to be very efficient at absorbing thermal radiation. So people will use that black irrigation tubing to heat up water. Just pump water through as much tubing as possible, and at the end, and when the water comes out, it's like 130 degrees, and you can use that to heat the system.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yep.
Where do they do this at?
Home growers do it. I've seen people have them. But anyways, let's talk a bit about tomatoes now. So one thing to keep in mind with this media, it is hard, it is sharp. If you dig through it all day, it'll cut your hands. So I'm gonna get some gloves.
Okay.
But this is the one of the most popular types of aquaponic systems, and we'll do aquaponics first. It's called a media bed system. There are other variants of aquaponic and hydroponic systems. I also really like the grow towers. But this is definitely the easiest kind of aquaponics system to operate as. I like to say hydroponics is easy, aquaponics is hard. But aquaponics is way more rewarding in my opinion. But if you want easy veggies, go with hydro. If you want to learn a craft, go with aquaponics.
If you want cool fish, go with aquaponics.
Yeah, if you want to raise fish, go with aquaponics. Oregon Spring, Roma. Yeah, we're looking for the Rutgers. Here we go. So, yeah, let me see. So Roma, Rutgers, and Oregon Spring. We have more Oregon Spring. Okay. So I think we did the Rutgers, then the Roma, then the Oregon Spring. So we'll do that. So when it comes to tomatoes, we want to disturb the roots very little. So I'm not going to wash off the soil. People say, or the planting mix, people say wash off the planting mix, but this stuff is inert anyways. I'd rather not just damage the root hairs, because we can see. And they're not root bound, so we don't need to, like, in my opinion, like, there's no need. So I'm just gonna soak this. I'm just gonna let it soak for a bit. Try not to let it fall into the water. But like maybe a good, like, and if some of the mix falls off, it's okay. Yeah, maybe a good, like, at least 10 seconds, ideally 30. And this will just get all those wonderful cytokinins into the root zone to stimulate root growth as the tomato plant gets adapted to its new environment. And so with tomatoes, we want to plant them deep. Because tomatoes have the ability to form roots along every section of their stem. And so we want the tomatoes to form a very vigorous root system. So we'll plant them deep as possible. That's nice and deep. See that? So everything that's submerged pretty much, except for say maybe the top inch, is going to form roots. That's going to be some help to tomatoes.
Yay.
Rutgers. Right here. Right?
First tomato.
Are these the Rutgers? I don't see that.
These ones are spring here.
Spring. Yeah, these are the Rutgers. It looks like the label fell out. We'll just have to remember these are the Rutgers. Yeah, here, Rutgers. Try not to disturb the roots when transplanting. Roots are extremely delicate.
Oh, that's smart to just let it wiggle in there.
I like to wiggle it
See,
very
he's
gently.
like wiggling it in there to get the dirt out.
But in some cases, it will come off, and that's okay. Just minimize disturbance. In like ecology in general, we're very in like agroecology, I should say, we're very concerned about managing disturbance. And this is one form of disturbance. So I'm just gonna dig this out. Just set it in there, ever so gently, and hope that it wasn't too much disturbance. I think that was fine though. Whenever I see all the soil fall off, like, you know, unless I'm trying to wash the soil off, which I am in some cases, I get nervous. The tomatoes are pretty vigorous, so I think they'll be just fine. So that's our Rutgers. Let's do our Roma. And these Romas are huge. This is a vigorous variety, for sure.
So these are gonna be, when do you think they'll be done? What month?
October.
October?
These are Determinate Tomatoes, so they're gonna bear their fruit within a short window. They're the bush type, not the vining type. Because if we wanted to grow the vining type, we'd want to erect a trellis, and that's a lot of work. Because the vining ones in aquaponics and hydroponics can get really out of control. I mean, you guys saw those cherry tomatoes over there, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are a bit root bound, it's okay. Not root bound enough for me to want to like tease the roots out. They are a little root bound because they're big. The Rutgers didn't seem to be a very strong variety, but I think it's also just because the seeds are a bit old. But I think the Romas will do quite well. The Oregon Spring seems to be less heat tolerant than the Roma. But we'll see. Like, you know, the cool thing about aquaponics, hydroponics is that in a way, you kind of get to cheat when it comes to like your heat tolerance and cold tolerance. What's that?
How is the heat tolerance different with aquaponics?
Much higher. Much higher. Like right now, in my aquaponic system at home, these tomatoes are doing that. They're not bearing. The ones that I'm growing at home like a Sicilian variety, I can't recall the name, and one called Carbon, in a media bed that's half this size. I have a carbon fruit that is just ripening up that is like that.
Oh my gosh. You need to take a picture of that tomato.
Oh yeah, it's just about ready. I think we might use it tonight and at dinner, and I'm probably going to save seeds from that one too.
Do you experiment when you cook?
Sometimes.
Or do you have actual recipes you follow?
I just kind of wing it. I'm pretty good with salads. I feel like as a gardener, you kind of have to be good with salads. It's like,
really?
You know, it's like if you're growing all these greens and like, you know, tomatoes and herbs and you don't know how to make a good salad, what are you doing, honestly?
That's true. You know, I just need to experiment more with salads. I end up using the greens for like wraps.
Oh, something ain't that. See that?
Ooh.
That's the issue we've been having. Something coming along and eating these.
Yeah.
It's either slugs or cutworms. Slugs / snails. Same difference, ultimately.
Oh, I brought that.
Oh.
I was going to use that to measure the kelp.
Let's be careful here. Sometimes I just like to slip it in there.
Are your hands like soaking?
What's that?
Your hands are soaking, huh?
Yeah. These are not exactly centered, but it's okay. Yeah, and you know, like,
Ooh.
Yeah, these aren't really centered, but it's okay. In aquaponics, hydroponics, you have a lot more wiggle room in terms of spacing too, because you don't really have, you really don't have competition when it comes to, you know, demand for nutrients between the different plants. So as long as you don't plant too densely, like your main concern is just airflow and like sunlight penetration in the system. Since the nutrients recirculate, as long as like the nutrient supply overall is adequate, there's really no competition for nutrients. So next we're doing the organ spring.
Oh, the wasp is looking for those kale.
Oh yeah, that's a police stage wasp.
Oh, that scares me.
Yeah, they're pretty terrifying, but they're our friends. That's the organ spring. Now let's focus in on those tomatoes. Really excited to get some beautiful fall tomatoes, and you know, we still get a lot of heat here in the fall, so they're going to be so sweet. Like we pretty much get heat into October here in the San Fernando Valley, and for like, you know, if you want to get like a last crop in of tomatoes, like there you go.
Yeah.
And I think these are going to be very prolific because I have these systems dialed in pretty well right now.
It's gonna be yummy. We could make some tomato soup. That's what I've been making. I'm like, I know it's the summer, but I have all these tomatoes and I can only use so much for salads and eggs, so I've been making tomato soup.
Yeah.
Should I share my recipe with you guys? It's a recipe that I saw on Pinterest, but it's pretty easy to follow. You basically just cook your tomatoes. You can either broil them or roast them in the oven, or you can just cook them on a pan with some oil. I like to use avocado oil. And then I heat that up with onion. You can either use red bell pepper or green bell pepper and garlic. And you just simmer that and let it soften until it's completely like soft. And then I use like a blender to blend it all together, and I like my tomato soup a little more creamy, so I'll add just a splash of milk, and I forgot, I add a lot of herbs. So honestly, I just kind of like experiment with the herbs, but I currently have basil growing along with lemon thyme, oregano, sage, and rosemary. So those are the herbs that I cook the tomato soup with.
That sounds delicious.
Yeah. And then I'll add a little bit of salt. I like my soup with pepper, so on my serving I'll add pepper. And you can either eat it by itself with a salad or make a little bit of like a toasted bread. And that is my tomato soup recipe.
Sounds really good. And I think these Determinate varieties are really good for making tomato soup because you get a lot of tomatoes out of these.
Oh, I'm excited.
As I said about Determinate tomatoes, generally you have a shorter harvest window. So when it comes to indeterminate or vining tomatoes, you will get a harvest all summer. Pretty much as soon as they start bearing, they're not going to stop. Wow. However, you know, your yield is going to be more spread out over the course of the season. In this case, with these Determinate tomatoes, you might only get tomatoes for like a couple weeks, but
you're gonna get a lot.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to can your tomatoes.
Yeah, that's exactly what these are grown for, is canning, actually. In general, the Determinate tomatoes, especially the Romas, of course, those are sauce tomatoes. But yeah, like this one's done. I think it looks good.
Ooh, let's do a little pano. Look at that. So what varieties are these again? This is...
So we've got Rutgers,
okay.
We've got Roma, and we've got Organ Spring.
Nice.
And I'm going to make sure to keep this nice and dialed in. So tomorrow I'm going to take the baseline measurements for all the tomatoes, just height and diameter of the stem, water chemistry readings. We'll get into water chemistry if we have time, and notes and whatnot, and then every single week I'm going to record how tall the plants are.
Oh, so this is part of the research too?
This is part of the research.
I thought it was just kale.
No, I asked Dr. B, hey, can we do tomatoes? And she's like, sure. So let's do tomatoes.
Oh, okay.
Because honestly, now
Cool.
is not a great time to do it.
Yeah.
Let's
Look at
see,
the
Rutgers.
weather. The weather just all of a sudden it got like,
We've had a hot summer.
it feels like fall right now.
Right now?
Like this is type of fall weather because it's like
Well,
very.
we're also in the shade, and for maybe the next couple
Look.
days, it's going to be in the 80s.
The sun is like clouded.
We're gonna
Covered
have a
with
little break
clouds.
from the heat, which is very much welcomed
Wait, when are we having a break from the heat?
over the next few days. That's why I said I'm going to seed and everything over the next few days, because once we get into August, it's going to be triple digits every single day. So
Oh my gosh, I am not looking forward to that.
me neither. I mean, I know my moringa's looking forward to it, but I'm certainly not.
I'm scared of that wasp. I'm like.
They also
You
like the
guys,
lemon
I
verbena.
am scarred. I've gotten stung by a wasp, so this makes me very like eerie.
Which kind of wasp? Do you remember? Was it one of those?
I don't remember. I just remember it was maybe a yellow jacket.
Was it as painful as a bee sting? I don't remember what you said. Was it worse?
I remember it stinging and it immediately gave me like a boil, like a bump, a
Yeah.
red bump.
You don't want to get
And
stung by a wasp.
we
But
had
even
to
I
take
think-
out the stinger and they put like lemon tree mud on my thing and the swelling went down. I guess that's
Yeah.
like a remedy? I don't know.
Yeah, I want to grow more of those plants here. Medicinal plants, anti-inflammatory plants, like the yarrow I was telling you about earlier. I've used the yarrow that's growing here to heal cut wounds.
Yeah.
And yarrow is also California native. You can get yarrow seeds that are the native variety quite easily. I got mine from Theodore Payne, but there are other companies who sell it. Again, not an endorsement. If you're looking to get native seeds, I would highly recommend talking to an indigenous person who sells them.
Where can we
So-
find this? Like,
Nicholas Hummingbird has sold seeds in the past. I'm not sure if he's still doing that, but he's on Instagram. Native Hummingbird.
native hummingbird?
I know he sells seeds. I'm sure there are others. But
Yeah.
there's plenty of places to get native seeds.
Would heirloom count as a native seed?
No.
No, huh?
Ecologically speaking, heirloom tomatoes that were bred here are not native. Because Lycopersicon esculentum, the species that is tomato, is not native to California. It's not invasive either, though, so grow it. They're yummy. I don't think there's really a native equivalent of a tomato, though. At least not as far as I know. I mean, there are native blackberries, and they're supposed to be really good. There are also native strawberries. Yeah, see the siphon is resetting right now? Hear it like gurgling? That's the
Yeah,
siphon
okay.
resetting. All the water is draining out.
Oh my gosh. Ah! I am
wasp still here?
scared. Yes.
Just ignore it. Unless it tries to land on you. Like, you know what the wasp is doing, right?
What?
The wasp is hunting for caterpillars.
I thought it was claiming its territory or
No,
something.
that's whenever you see wasps flying around, especially like,
Yeah.
when you have,
Look at it, it's right there.
when you're
It's
growing
in the lemon
brassicas,
verbena.
they're usually hunting for caterpillars. So I think, yeah, it looks like it's looking for caterpillars. I guess there are caterpillars on lemon verbena. I haven't seen any on there. Normally they're on the brassicas.
Yeah.
Where's the Roma? Is that the Roma? So I have more. Very easy to start tomatoes from seed. These were started June 24th.
Oh wow.
These are a month old.
Yeah, did I tell you we only planted 3 tomato plants and somehow we have like 8 of them now. I don't know where they came from. It might have been from our compost.
Tomatoes
or...
volunteer very easily, especially the wild ones.
Yeah.
One of my goals is to have Matt's wild cherry all over my garden.
Yeah, gosh.
They're pretty sweet. They're pretty nice tasting too. I mean, the match wild cherries are a bit more on the tart side, but they're good. And the match wild cherry was selected in Mexico. It's native to Mexico. The tomatoes are like native to the neotropics, which is Central America and South America.
I would want to visit more of Central America.
I've been to Costa Rica. It's beautiful.
Oh, nice.
One of my favorite places on earth.
Really?
Yeah, it's just so ecologically rich, and the people are the nicest people. It's so nice.
Everyone I hear that travels, they just say the people are so nice. I'm like, is it the people being nice, or just people in LA can be a little bit...
No, in Costa Rica they're actually nice. But I know people in LA, that whole deal, but in Costa Rica people are actually amazing. Like they're so friendly. And like, you know, you could just say hi to someone on the street. People just say hi to you on the street in Costa Rica. I know that's also like a thing in Europe, but like everybody does. And like when I was there, I was like, oh wait, did this person just greet me? Were they talking to me? People like to say, oh, Americans, you know, are very antisocial. You know, it's true to an extent, but you know, it's just the culture. Not knocking, you know, us Americans per se, but it's a different culture for sure. Let's dip that on the stem. Now, see, in this case, it kind of came off. And that's not a problem. This is a healthy and vigorous tomato seedling, so I think we'll be just fine.
You know what? I should do that. I should just say hi to people on the street and...
You'll get weird looks. Definitely.
Well, sometimes, now that we're wearing masks again, you can't really tell, but before, when masks were not a thing, I wouldn't even realize
Oregon Spring.
Oh, you're doing Oregon Spring next? Which one's
that one?
That's this one. This one's Oregon Spring.
I had another tray. What happened to it?
Didn't you use it?
Did I?
Yeah.
I guess I did. Well, Oregon Spring nonetheless.
That's this one.
Yep. Rutgers.
How many? You're doing 2 Oregon Spring?
Yeah. So 6 per plot, and this is pushing it a little bit for the soil, but I think the hydro will be fine. Hydro and aqua. Oregon Spring, it's such a classic like slicing tomato. That's really what it is. So it's like what you get at the supermarket pretty much.
You know, I don't even know if I have... Actually, no, I do have a favorite tomato.
What's that?
I forgot the variety, but I know that it's golden. It's like a golden yellow.
Gold? Is it a cherry or?
It's like, it looks like a cherry tomato, but it's gold.
You think it could be sun gold?
Probably. I just remember with Mr. List, I went to like a tomato tasting.
Oh yeah, Mr. List is the tomato fiend. He's a tomato expert.
He is thriving right now with his...
I'm sure Mr. List tomatoes are just going nuts.
Yeah.
He's the tomato expert, like the tomato god.
Yeah. The black ones, I think...
tomatoes like as well as Mr. List.
The prettiest ones, though, I think they're like black with like red vinings on them.
Oh yeah, there are a lot of really pretty black varieties. Those black cherries are pretty nice looking.
I know. I feel like I'm gonna eat all the tomatoes here.
Please don't. We need to donate them to the food pantry too, and I barely had any. I did eat some of those, but I think also we had some visitors. But we have cherry tomatoes growing in 2 other locations now, so. And I'm gonna see if we can get the Matt's wild cherry to perennialize here too. I doubt that's going to happen, but at the very least it'll volunteer. Because tomatoes can be perennial and like.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they can. At least indeterminate ones, not determinate ones. Those will die back.
I'm curious about this wild cherry. I wonder if that's what I have growing in my garden. Because somehow our watermelon bed ended up with two cherry tomato plants.
The wild cherries don't seem to yield that much though. But they're so hard.
Okay.
That's generally the thing with a lot of the wild vegetables is they're so hardy, but you might not get as much of a yield all the time. Which is fine, you know, like if your climate is really rough for some reason, and of course we can talk about the effects of climate change, you want hardier plants, really, that can withstand more heat, more drought, you know, more pests, what have you. It's all about, like, you know, what can handle stress at the end of the day. And like how much stress are your plants going to experience throughout their life, and how do we manage that, how do we minimize that, how do we mitigate it. All right, how about that? So we'll save this. I'm going to pour that on the support species. They really like to have the extra nutrients. Like if you're growing support species, which are what we're using, essentially we're growing them as fertilizer for our veggies and for our trees. Do you ever have any like spent, you know, rooting solution or whatever that could be used as a fertilizer at all? Like, because you could use the seaweed extract as fertilizer. Just pour it on your support species. Pour it wherever. I pour it on my fruit trees too. They love it.
Yeah, they would love that stuff.
Let's move this out of the way. Let's talk about the water. What time is it?
4:53.
Well, we don't have much time, but we have enough time for a water test. So I'm going to get the gloves.
Oh, I forgot you were doing the water test.
Always good to have these on hand if you're doing hydroponics or aquaponics. So this is the API Freshwater Test Kit. And this is what all the aquaponics folks use, or a lot of them use, to test their water. So this will test, I realized I was not in frame. So this will test pH, ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate. In aquaponics, those are like our main water parameters that we're concerned with. So the pH is going to affect nutrient availability and fish health. The ammonia, nitrites, and nitrates are your nitrogen species. And they're sort of like indicators of the overall health of your system. You know, and to put it very, very simply, that's a huge oversimplification. But in a nutshell, ammonia is like a primary component of fish waste, and nitrate is the end product of the bacterial process that processes the fish waste, which is called nitrification. It's like one of the main processes in the system. Nitrate is non-toxic to plants and non-toxic to fish and very plant available. And ammonia is toxic to fish. So we don't want to have ammonia. We want to have nitrate, so we need to have bacteria to convert it over. We need to have a good colony of these nitrifying bacteria to convert the ammonia to nitrates. And so when we measure the nitrogen species, we're measuring the activity of these bacteria. Well, yeah, we're measuring the activity of the bacteria and like the amount of like nutrients in your system. Because nitrate is pretty much like however much nitrate is in your system very, very roughly correlates to the levels of all the other nutrients, with a couple exceptions. The main ones being iron, potassium, and in some cases magnesium and phosphorus, because those tend to be deficient in aquaponics because they're really not found in sufficient quantities in fish food. We'll do this really quick. We're just going to take some water samples and we're going to test the system to see how it's doing. We should start to see some nitrates building up since I removed the plants a couple days ago. The tail plants were quite overgrown. Okay, 5 ml samples. So the pH one I'm just going to do right away. You don't need gloves for that because it's not toxic. Some of these reagents that we use to carry out these tests are actually toxic, and so we should wear gloves. But the pH test, as we'll see in a moment, is not. Because, look for example, the difference between these two. Warnings? No warnings. You want to be really safe, wear gloves, but you know, in my experience with the pH test, it's not a problem. So we're going to put 3 drops. One, two, three. And then we have this handy dandy color chart we're going to use to read the results. 6.6, which is absolutely perfect. That is exactly what we want for aquaponics, a pH of 6.6, which is slightly acidic, very comparable to the pH of milk. So now I'm going to don my gloves, and we're going to perform the nitrogen species tests. I like to do nitrate first because the nitrate levels tend to vary the most in the system. Your target range is anywhere between 10 and 80 depending on what you're growing, and that's in parts per million. So for like, every million water molecules, you want 10 to 80 molecules of nitrate. So this is a two-part test. I'm just going to give this a little shake, agitate it a little bit to ensure that the reagent solution is homogeneous. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There we are. So that is part one of the test.
So you do this every time you change out the plants?
I do it every week. And this is number 2. This is a suspension, so we need to make sure it's homogeneous. We need to make extra sure it's homogeneous because the suspended particles do tend to settle out over time. So I like to bang it against a hard surface, shake it vigorously. It says to do it in the instructions for 30 seconds before adding the reagent, and 30 seconds after, just shaking the test tube, but we don't really have to do that. It's fine. This is just for demonstration purposes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Ready? So I'm just going to give this a little shake, and it will begin to see the color develop over the course of 5 minutes. And I can already see that it's beginning to turn orange, which indicates that there are nitrates present in the system. So next we're going to do the nitrites, and nitrite is an intermediary product in the microbial process, nitrification, which deals with the ammonia that the fish excrete through their gills. It's basically their urine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just 5 drops. Give it a little shake. Let it develop over the course of 5 minutes. And we'll read the results before we end the live stream. And this will give us a snapshot of the overall health of our system at the present moment. So this system has just been cleaned. Cleaned the bed, cleaned the submersible filter, which is a filter that sits underwater before the pump. It's attached to the pump intake. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
So anyone who has an aquaponic system, they should do this every week.
Ideally, I test mine like once a month or two.
I'm curious if there's. When did you think an I know here LA we don't have 4 seasons as much as like other.
Ask Richard from Sustainability, and he'll tell you we have 4 seasons. He'll just tell you that our winter is in the summer. That's what he told me. It's a really interesting take on it, and I can see how that makes sense because, like, our spring is like our winter when we're getting the rain and everything's starting to wake up.
True.
Our summer is spring where everything is growing. Our fall is when everything is starting to dry out in like May, June, and then our winter is the summer where everything's dry. That's like you're using
those are our 4 seasons.
You're using plant growth as your reference point for your seasons. But so, like climatically speaking, if we're talking about growing seasons in a horticultural sense, we have 2. We have a warm, dry season and a cool, wet season. All right, so these results are already developing. I think we can read them. So it's fine if we don't allow the full time period. So nitrates, we're looking at 40 parts per million, which is great. This is great for your early vegetative growth of tomatoes. So they're gonna, now once they get established, they're gonna grow very rapidly. Nitrite, 0, which is what we want.
McKenna needs to test her hydro system pH.
Yes,
so badly.
Please do that, I'll help you. So 0, that's what we want. And ammonia, we're sitting at 0.25, which is a bit concerning. You want it at 0 as well, but not a huge concern. This could be an indicator that there's something wrong inside of the media bed, like that there's not adequate water flow going to a certain section. And that's the issue that I've had with the system consistently. And at this point, the only reason we're having it is because the system is sinking into the ground a little bit right here. So we're getting water collecting right here. The water flow is inadequate. So I think that's the only reason right now. Before, the issue was the siphon. So the issue with the siphon was this media guard right here did not have enough water flow coming through it. And as I said, that's due to what was used as the media guard. This plastic drain pipe right here, that's a quick and easy solution to build a media guard, which just prevents this media from getting inside of the siphon and clogging it. But in my opinion, not a good solution. In my opinion, what you want to do is you want to actually custom make one of these media guards. And so I just pretty much drilled more holes into it, and that helps with the problem.
Okay. It's 502.
502. So this is a pretty healthy system. So this one's going now. We have an automatic fish feeder on it that will feed the fish every single morning at 11 a.m. And for the hydro system, it's all clean as well. We just need to add some nutrients. So before we go, very briefly, let's talk about what we're using for our nutrients.
These little babies.
Master blend. So master blend, hydro blend, tomato and vegetable blend, Epsom salt, and calcium nitrate. And these guys come from fossil fuels. So it's cheap. This stuff is dirt cheap. Like this amount costs about $30. And this will last you with that kind of system for over a year.
Oh wow, that is cheap.
It's not sustainable. So if you want to be more sustainable, I'll show you what to do.
Yes, let's encourage sustainability here.
Fish emulsion. This is a byproduct of the fish industry. Pretty much like all the fish guts and bits and pieces in the fillet factories where they make the fish fillets, blended up and made into this.
Okay.
And then also
Fish fertilizer.
kelp.
Liquid kelp.
You can also use these fish and kelp blends. You can also use kelp meal. Then to feed the microbes in our organic hydroponic system right here. I'm doing fantastic. Oh, look at that spider. That's a brown widow. That's a brown widow right there. No bueno.
That's scary.
You
said that so calmly. I would have screamed.
So this is to feed the microbes in the organic hydroponic system, unsulfured blackstrap molasses.
Can you make gingerbread cookies with those?
Yeah, why not?
Okay.
Anyways, I know we're over in terms of time. I don't want to keep you guys.
Yeah,
thank you for joining us today. We'll talk about hydroponic systems a bit more extensively in the future, and aquaponic systems. The thing with aquaponic systems is like, there's so much ground to cover. I can't, talk about it all in a live stream, but we can do demonstrations.
Yeah, here and there.
Of certain things. With hydro, it's easy. We can talk about how to start a hydro system, how to fertilize a hydro system, how to transplant, all that good stuff. So we'll be talking about that in the future. Oh goodness, got something in my eye. Anyways, thank you for joining us today. See you all next week, where we'll be talking about worm farms. How to start vermicomposting. Easiest thing to do.
I'm so excited.
If you have a small space, easiest way to compost, makes excellent compost. You can do it indoors if you live in an apartment, under your sink in a bucket, like it's that easy. Anyways.
Yes, bye.
Have a good one.